Hi, welcome back to the Coda podcast. I'm Ollie Flower.
And I'm Roger Harris.
Here's a podcast from our Coda 22 event, which I think we really feel was our best content yet. It was our best event yet, and it was so good to see everyone back together again after such a long hiatus, right?
So good. It was friggin' awesome to be back together. So much to be proud of. Agree. Maybe our best content ever. And how about having a Climate Active or Australian Government Climate Active certified carbon neutral event? That's a first.
It was one hell of an achievement, that.
Massive achievement. And there'll be lots more on the website that you can track down about how we did that.
So please go to the website, check out the other podcasts and video content, the YouTube channel, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And do share it with your network, tag us on socials, and spread the word, because this is the last Coda event and it's been one hell of a ride. So thank you for everybody who's been part of it.
Yeah, an absolute privilege to have been part of it. For more on the sort of winding up of Coda, check out on the website, and hope to see you all soon.
See ya.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coda Earth plenary session on sustainable healthcare and energy. I'm Kate Charlesworth. In my day job, I lead the new Climate Risk and Net Zero unit at New South Wales Health, and I'm delighted to be your chair for today's session. So we're here, of course, because the health system currently has a big problem. We are, in effect, producing our own patients. As a health system, we use huge amounts of resources, we produce vast amounts of waste, we still use fossil fuel-based energy, we have a big carbon footprint. Globally, if the health system were a country, it would be the 5th biggest polluter on the planet. And so the irony is, of course, that we are then, as a system, major contributors to the climate crisis, which is harming human health. And we're seeing that increasingly, even in the last few months, higher rates of extreme heat, storms, floods, bushfires and droughts, and of course all the associated climate health impacts, shifts in infectious diseases, food and water insecurity, rise in pollutants, mental health impacts. And so as a health system, we have a huge job ahead of us to decarbonise or to get to a net zero health system. And the 4 speakers today will be talking about their experiences and their roles in that, and they're a remarkable lineup of speakers, the leaders in this space, both in Australia and internationally. But before I introduce them, I'd just like to remind you that we're on Twitter today. The hashtag is Coda22, so please tell us what you like, what you're interested in, what you're thinking, and whether you have any questions for our speakers. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Nick Watts. Nick has a very long and impressive CV, but all you really need to know about Nick is that he's actually an Australian doctor, but has been in the UK for some time. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the National Health Service in England. He leads about 160 staff in the Greener NHS program, which is the leading healthcare decarbonisation program in the world. Welcome, Nick.
Hello! God, it's nice to be here in person, and God, it is nice to be in a country where we pronounce the word data correctly. I'm going to be quick and I'm going to say 3 things. I'm going to talk about 3 things. It's going to be simple. The NHS is big. How big? 1.4 million healthcare professionals. We are rivaled in size only by the Chinese army, the American army, Walmart. We are the 5th largest organisation in the world. 160 billion pounds of spend. I'm going to talk about why the NHS cares about climate change. I'm going to talk about what the hell you do about it once you've agreed it is a problem. And then I'm going to talk about what that actually looks like, the how, the 9 a.m. tomorrow morning question. Why? It's our 74th birthday, just a heartbeat ago. The NHS exists to deliver high-quality care for all now and for future generations. It is on the footer, it's on the top of every single hospital as you walk through the damn door. We are good healthcare professionals, and we know that this morning, global average surface temperature rises at 1.17 degrees above its pre-industrial average, we know that unless you respond to that climate crisis, to that health crisis, the NHS cannot continue to deliver high-quality care for all now and for future generations. We know this because of the doubling of the number of NHS facilities in high-risk flood zones. We know this because of the tripling of the duration, the quadrupling of the frequency of fatal heat waves across the country. The why is damn simple, because the climate crisis is a health crisis. Now, we've seen what running at a healthcare crisis, at a health crisis, looks like over the last couple of years. You don't just do one or two things and then wash your hands and go home. You don't just turn the lights off, turn the temperature down, and say, good job, job done. You do absolutely everything. So for the NHS, that means for us net zero by 2045, and I'm going to be very quick and transparent by precisely what we mean, because no one should ever get to say the words net zero without having to clarify that they mean all of their emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. They mean that globally they are taking responsibility for their entire footprint, and they are not offsetting more than 10% of their emissions. You won't ever hear me say the word offset until we get to 2044. The NHS's footprint, our strategy, only has an 8% offset trajectory. And it's critical that when people say, I have a fantastic plan to get to net zero, you question that. You question the scope, you question their offsets, and you question their milestones. And for the NHS, we have an 80% reduction target by 2032. So the why, the what, easy to talk about the climate science, easy to talk about the risks the NHS faces into the decade, easy to talk about our trajectories off to 2045. Easy. Far harder is thinking through what the hell that means for an organization of 1.4 million healthcare professionals. Far harder. And I want to submit that the challenge to the NHS, the challenge to any organization, any healthcare system, is not economic or financial. It is not technical. It is not technological. The challenge is that the NHS is big and you have to unlock our greatest resource, the passion, the anger of our 1.4 million healthcare professionals. That is how you get to net zero. And so for the NHS, it means three things. It means autonomy. It means capability and capacity. And it means having a little bit of fun. Everything I'm going to talk about from here on is what the NHS has done just in the last 12 months, because that's the other thing. The time to talk about 2044, 2045 is over. The time to talk about anything other than 12 months back into the past is over. If you are stuck there, you're resting on your laurels and you've got to move on. So let's start with autonomy. We have to make sure that our staff know that a good healthcare professional, that a high-quality, high-value healthcare system is a net zero healthcare system, is a net zero, is a low-carbon healthcare professional and clinical decision. So for us, we don't just have one net zero strategy in the United Kingdom. In fact, every single hospital in the country has its own net zero strategy. It has engaged with its patients. It has been written. They have been written by their clinicians. They've been published, they've been approved by their board. They have all appointed board-level leads to take this on. They all have clinical leads to take this work on. You have to get your strategy right. You have to make sure that you have, frankly, the legal capacity to do it. And so for the NHS, with the Health and Care Act of 2022, just this July past, we made sure that right into the beating heart of what it means to be the NHS, what it means to be a healthcare system in the United Kingdom, in England, was our commitment to net zero. New statutory guidance powers, new duties placed on every single hospital, every single primary care facility, every single integrated care system across the country. Because it is critical, and you see this embedded into the job descriptions of hundreds of thousands of health professionals now, it is critical that we understand that it's our responsibility and that our 1.4 million healthcare professionals have permission to run at this problem. Autonomy matters. The capability and the capacity matters. Anyone that tells you that this is an economic challenge, you tell them to get lost. It is not a financial challenge anymore. We're past that. But does it require upfront capital investment? Absolutely. So for the NHS, we have invested just in the last 12 months, £657 million into decarbonising our healthcare system. It's a lot of money until I tell you what happens next. The average investment that the NHS can make into low-carbon healthcare, it has a return of 3.7 years. Better than almost anything you can invest in healthcare. It turns out that not only is the response to climate change good for health, it is just good for common business. It saves cash. You have to invest in that capacity. You have to set some of those targets, some of those long-term trajectories, and then give your staff the ability to figure out how to make it happen. And so the NHS has been clear. We buy a lot of stuff, 82,000 suppliers out across the world. We have been clear. Within the decade, the NHS will no longer purchase from anyone that does not meet or exceed our commitments on net zero. And fudge words like within the decade, you've also got a question. So let me be clear. 1 minute past midnight, April 1st, 2027, new qualifying criteria coming in for all contracts for the NHS. If you want to do business with us, we are only interested in talking to you if you are demonstrating clearly that you are a partner that is moving at this. Those are the parameters we set. It is up to our asthma nurses. It is up to our community OTs. It is up to our clinicians across the system, our 11,000 procurement officers, to figure out how to go and make that happen. They are empowered with the full weight of the NHS, our Chief Commercial Officer, our full board, and now the Health and Care Act of 2022. So the autonomy matters, the capability, the capacity matters. And finally, fun, relatedness, having a sense of connection. When you look around a rugby pitch, or God forbid, I'm a Formula One fan, let's not talk about that, a sport team, a political party, it is the team that is having the most fun that I put my money on winning. It is the team that is smiling, that is high-fiving, that is trying some stuff out and getting it wrong and enjoying that is going to win. And so we have had to really heavily invest in clinical innovation, in providing the leadership capacity to our clinicians. £31 million of new research funding, new innovation funding, flooding the NHS. If you have a good idea and you want to improve the care of your patients and tackle climate change, we've got some cash for you. It has led to chemotherapy drugs delivered to the Isle of Wight through drones. It has led to the world's first zero-emission ambulance. It has led to innovations out across the entire healthcare system, and God, it has been fun to see what our 1.4 million healthcare professionals can do. The challenge for the NHS is not, the challenge for a healthcare system is not economic, financial, technical, technological. It is whether or not we can unlock the passion, the anger of our 1.4 million of the 642,000 healthcare professionals in the United Kingdom and in Australia. That's my why, that's my what, and that's my how of what it means to decarbonise a healthcare system. That and so much more. I'm going to leave you with three things, three key messages. The climate crisis is a health crisis, number one. The time for talking about stuff 10 years ago or 10 years into the future is over. The only thing that matters now, the only thing, is what are you going to do about it at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning? And unless your action is actionable at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, maybe 10 a.m. because I understand there's a party tonight, it doesn't count anymore. And finally, anyone that tells you that it can't be done should take a look at what healthcare did over the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and get the hell out of the way of the people that are already doing it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. And just while you're taking the seat, I guess one of the big questions is, when people think about sustainability in healthcare, they think about solar panels on hospital roofs and staff cycling to work and things like that. But actually, we know that more than half the footprint is from the stuff, the scope 3 emissions, the embedded carbon in everything that we use and buy and prescribe every day. So it's interesting to hear about your sort of procurement policy. What support have you had from pharma and medical device companies in addressing those scope 3 emissions?
Sure. So the NHS is big. I've already said that. 2.6% of the global pharmaceutical market. That's a lot of money, hey? You're right, our emissions profile sits out in the pharmaceutical companies, in the medical device companies out across the world, and we share very common suppliers. I've been clear about our commitment. 1 minute past midnight, April 2027. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on there as well. In fact, April 1st, 2022, just a couple of months ago, we introduced a 10% weighting into every tender. Every single tender the NHS puts out, 10% net zero weighting. If you want to do business with the NHS, you have to at least start to have that conversation before those qualifying criteria come in. The response from industry was, Nick, you can't be serious. And then to our chief executive, Amanda, you can't be serious. And then, oh God, they're serious. And once we got over that, once we agreed that this was the direction of travel for healthcare in the United Kingdom, but the inevitable direction of travel for healthcare globally, the conversation became so much more productive. In fact, the 15 largest suppliers for the NHS, scattered not just in medicines, but across everything we purchase, are now fully aligned with our own net zero ambitions, because frankly, when you go and ask them, they say, yeah, it's a real problem. The French healthcare system have also started demanding that. In fact, they adopted the first 7 steps of the NHS's sustainable roadmap. In Germany, they have a new federal department in their ministry focused on climate change and health in the United States, and even in a couple of states in Australia. So it's actually been quite a collaborative process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they understand this is the way that things are going, and it works for business as well. I guess the question that I and a lot of my colleagues get asked a lot is, from all sorts of clinical staff, well, what can I do? You know, you've talked about the importance of harnessing 1.4 million NHS staff. I don't think we've got 1.4 million in Australia, but it's also comparatively large. What are the things that people can actually do? I guess drawing on some of the best stories that you've heard from the NHS.
Yeah, it's a question you get asked a lot, you can imagine. Medicine's big, broad, diverse, wonderful, messy, and so there isn't one answer, right? But the things that I have seen that have really taken hold in the United Kingdom and anywhere around the world is where a group of individuals, a tribe of people, nurses, OTs, anaesthetists, GPs, have identified a source of emissions that they uniquely control. No one else can touch, they control, and they have agency over. And they've acted on it, and they've run at it and blown it out of the water. We talk a lot about anaesthetic gases. There's one that we hate. It's called desflurane. Its footprint is annoyingly large. 3 or 4 years ago, it was inconceivable that the NHS would have a hospital that didn't use that gas. Then a couple of anaesthetists stood up and said, actually, we disagree. We think we could do without it. Everyone said, you're mad. And then they proved that they could do without it. And then 2, and then 3, and then 48 hospitals across the United Kingdom today no longer use that gas at all, simply because it's bad for the environment, bad for our carbon footprint. That happened because they were individual, passionate, angry clinicians. We have our community OTs and physios. When we started 3 years ago as well, only 11% of NHS trusts had a functioning recycling scheme for our mobility aids, only 11%. Today it's up to 82%. And again, what is happening there is someone said, I uniquely can control that, and I can stand up and I can do something about that. The really important thing was that the action they were taking was actionable at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Yep. Okay, terrific. And then I guess, the big question is, what are the next steps now for greener NHS?
Yeah, sure. This and everything else, right? Healthcare is big, so we have started. We've had one hell of a lot of fun as we've been going. We've unlocked a fair bit of passion, anger in our healthcare professionals. But this is going to be a 25-year journey, right? The thing that I think is probably next for us is getting to that scaling point. We have developed the world's first zero-emission ambulance. We've trialled it out in each of the 10 ambulance trusts across the country. What's really exciting is when the London Ambulance Service turns around and says, actually, I don't just want the 3 prototypes you gave us to trial, but we're going to start to purchase these as standard. We want 44, and we want them by the end of the financial year, please. When this starts to become business as usual, when you start to bake it into just what it means to be a good ambulance service, what it means to be a good community healthcare service, what it means to be a good acute trust. And I think that comes, and frankly the reason I am, Roger, here, frankly the reason I care so much about what happens in Australia and around the world is that comes when there isn't just one healthcare system running at this. It comes when we are all running at this together, right? Because medicine is messy, it is diverse, it requires people to be trying things out, getting it wrong, and trying again. So we're excited. As I mentioned briefly, we have seen that happen. We've seen the French Ministry of Health and Social Affairs have got 72 jobs out at the moment. If you speak French and want to go and work on health and climate change, I think they're looking. Germany, the United States, Australia, everywhere you look, healthcare systems are taking this more and more seriously, which means that the competition is about to become good fun as well. The competition even with Scotland, the competition with Wales, competition with Australia on who is going to be one of the greener healthcare systems out there is, I think, what is coming. We know for the NHS, 91%, we ask them every 3 months, what do you care about? We know that 91% of healthcare professionals in the United Kingdom desperately care about this. In fact, it is one of our main retention strategies in the United States, in the United Kingdom, is making sure that our healthcare professionals know that if you work for the NHS, you are empowered, you are able to engage with this stuff, embedding that into core practice. Did I answer your question, or did I just talk around in circles?
Well, I mean, I think next steps, yes, partially, but I mean, how confident are you of meeting your sort of targets over the next 5 or 10 years, and then what are going to be the trickiest things at the end?
We hit our first year target. We hit our second year target. We're going to hit our third and fourth year target. Year 5 gets tricky. Year 6 gets tricky. I kind of hope one day that we miss one of our targets and I get shouted at by our healthcare workforce, by our board, right? And that's the kind of passion and anger that we've seen from the NHS, that we are told constantly to go further, told constantly to go faster. Is it achievable? Well, let me tell you a secret about how it was designed. Our 2045 target was designed to be right at the barrier of what is achievable, but what is responsive to the climate crisis. So 50-50. And the second we gain confidence that we are going to be able to hit that target, the second I am certain we can hit 2045, we will move that target forward. Because the climate crisis is a health crisis we've sat on our hands for a couple of decades. And so, is it fast enough? No, never fast enough if you compare your progress to where you need to be at the end of this journey. But is it fast enough compared to where we were yesterday? Yeah, it's damn exciting.
Yeah, it's great to hear.